are there problems in the way that things have been trained? And any sort of built-in bias, as an example. And what happens if we're able to move away from sort of this closed source system? So, two big questions.
If you've ever looked in the comments section on YouTube or Reddit, and felt the kind of general toxicity, I think you give people anonymity, they say crazy stuff. Totally unbiased training would assume that's reality, would speak in that way to people and would think in the ways that just random people on the internet do. How you solve that problem, I have no idea, but I think, we're a few years out, I think, from an open source model that's as large and capable as GPT is today. I think it'll always be several years ahead of the big ones will, but like even just imagining GPT 3.5 a couple of years ago, something that good that you can run for free on-prem and or with how cheap things are getting in Moore's law, like you can train however you kind of want. Grok is a good example, like it's trained heavily on Twitter data, which is a lot of text that other companies don't have, and it's pretty different. We're evaluating Grok right now for a feature set that we can't achieve with Claude or OpenAI. So I don't know how, I'm not an AI ethicist. It's interesting to watch though.
Well, so I'm not on the Gemini team, so I can't really comment to what challenges they come across. But I will say, to your point, the way to tackle that, from what I've seen, is, well, at least one way to help with the problem is to make sure your data can be as unbiased as possible. That's why it's so important that the training data and that eval set that you are feeding into the model is, very multifaceted, has all kinds of data representative in there, to help, it get as unbiased as possible. Now, what is as unbiased as possible? I don't know, because I'm not a team, but just saying that would be a way to be able to help the model, make better decisions.
I think one thing that's also intriguing to keep in mind, and I don't know where everybody here works, how many of you guys work for Series B company? So I consider Series B and beyond is not a startup at that point. There's so much money. It's personal bias. Now, looking at that, I'm looking at there's a big difference. There's a lot of spaghetti code in these large companies, and there's a lot of legacy features that have to be kept in mind. I mean, you work for a massive company, there's a lot of features that guys built a long time ago that you have to build around and to keep in mind. Does this work? Does that work? Do we just trash it? Do we come up with a new one? New designs. I think that's very different from maybe an earlier stage company where it's okay to break things because you don't have a whole lot of legacy. You don't have people who are married to this concept of a product and used to and expectations, and also you can also just generate completely new code bases. So I think that's something to keep in mind, is just the legacy mentality of a company and how large they are compared to a startup. You might be able to maybe answer your question a little bit, is that it's okay to go through and break things a little more at the earlier stages to get more in.
Yeah. So by the way, just sort of marking time a bit, we've got a few more minutes and we'll have hit the 1 hour mark. And I'd like to maybe ask my last question before we open it up to the audience. So this is looking forward, right? I've heard a lot of people saying a lot of different things when it comes to sort of where we are on the innovation curve, right? So like so normally like an innovation curve is kind of like this large arc, and then it kind of plateaus, right? It's plateau, arc, plateau. And so we could be in the middle of it. We could be at the early stage, we could be at the end stage, right? If we had to pick a single classification, beginning, middle, or end, roughly, where do you think we are? And does it make you have any interesting thoughts? Based on that conclusion?
Can you clarify
Like-
on that?
like-
Is
like
end
our-
stage like Terminator?
No, are we, no, well, no, not end stage of the innovation curve, which is to say, we're almost done. LLMs are almost as good as they're gonna get. Middle would be like, we've had a lot of progress, there's still a lot to go, or we're just scratching the surface.
I think this answer is going to be really biased. Everybody has a biased opinion and I also have that point. So from my opinion, I think that it's a beginning. The reason, and I have some reasoning is that last 100 years, we still think about the humanity that. So all the innovation happened from the human because of the information they absorb. So rate of absorption of this information is going to slow down. Think about like the things that you can do with the chat GPT in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. This is not possible. It is possible to do the same thing without GPT in like 2 hours or 4 hours. So like this space of like how we have absorbed this information, getting the information and making the things related to create another story. This is possible because of this tool we have in our hand, which means that tomorrow we can build anything because of just our, so the only limitation will be likely our imagination. Think about it, everybody having the one personal assistant that is 100x better than you, and what are the things you can do? Literally just infinite possibilities are here from here. So that's my bias. Would love to hear anybody else's bias here.
I can go out too.
Okay. I find there's a bias why I'm going next. Like, let's see what he says. I think that we're,
I can have an answer.
I've got a thought of an answer and sometimes it comes out as I go along. So some of this is, a little innovative, innovative along the way. But yeah, in popping, sorry. But I think we're more at the middle stage, I would say. I think it's very intriguing to see where we're at. I could actually tell you, personally, I've used AI to even make decisions on things. In fact, I use AI, I trust AI enough to make a decision in some cases on how I would respond to business decisions, to how I would go through and even I ask questions about, okay, well, my daughter is saying this and that and acting this and that way, what would you recommend? Or here's all of the stuff I have, what kind of meals can I make? And sometimes even make cocktails. I expect it to be good. The fact that I expect it to be good means that it's come a long way. I have expectations now. I trust it now. And I think that's very important, is that we have trust. It's no different than we have Waymos now. No one would get in a Waymo if you didn't trust the Waymo. Pretty good to get you from point A to point B safely, more than anything. I think that AI has definitely come a long way. I think we have a ways to go. I think what would halt it more than anything would be distrust, or simply it comes back to us as engineers. We're the ones who are making it go through and grow and get it to the next level. I think that there's always going to be a lot of concerns and biases. So we definitely have a lot of people who are frightened of AI. I think that there's a lot of amazing things, and I'm not personally frightened. I've done much time there. I just use that because it's an easy soundbite, but at the same time, there's Wally, love, and other things that come from it. And there's also laziness that comes from that too. I can see us doing that too. I was just having that conversation on driving my wife, and I'm just wondering, hey, we're letting it make all these decisions for us. At what point do we start becoming, those fat, lazy people that are on the ship that are just drinking the sodas, and we're letting the AI do absolutely everything for us? I think that's where I say, what is the end game? It's the end game where AI does everything for us, and it just replaces everything, where we trust it so much with everything, in some cases to our own demise. But I think we're maybe mid-range. There's still a lot of ways to go, and I think we do need guardrails in some cases, but it's doing some amazing things right now and making my life a lot easier.
Let's see, so for me personally, I think we're very much at the beginning. Part of that is just thinking about how we even started this conversation. I don't feel if a technology was that far along, we would even have to start with defining it. Like, that's literally how we started the conversation today, where, we're trying to explain what AI is. I mean, does anybody need an explanation for how the internet works? You know what I mean? So, yeah, very much at the beginning. And I feel like through so many things we're talking about, we're still talking about, well, how can we improve the AI? So that means, okay, there's a lot of room there. What are the new use cases for AI? Okay, great. That means we've not thought about everything yet. So it's just, there's so much evidence that shows that we haven't yet thought about what's possible here. We're still exploring it. We're still, learning new things with it. Learning new things about it, and also trying to see what else we can do using it. And there's just like so much of nuance there. So very, very multifaceted, fascinating time to be around. And just be alive to, try this stuff out, because, imagine the next generation, like, oh yeah, it's AI, whatever, like, so we are the ones who are actually innovating with it, which is kind of cool, so, yeah.
I think we're very much at the beginning.
All right, so if I average out all the answers here, and I'm sort of beginning, middle, sort of, yeah, we're on a 3 out of 10 in terms of where it could go. I'm just gonna take the consensus. So, okay, well, we've got time for a couple questions. I saw some questions on the Eventbrite, but I don't even know if the question askers are here, much less if we didn't already cover them. I think we covered a lot of ground. But yeah, does anybody have anything they'd like to ask within the context that we've been talking about, or outside of it, for that matter? New questions? I see 2 hands. The gentleman in the back raised his hand a fraction of a second faster.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Felix. I used to work for Waymo as a test engineer. So I was agreeing with what Kyle said about AI is non-deterministic and based on probability. And also from my research and experience, it's also like the autonomous vehicle, like self-driving is also random and dynamic. It's always moving around. So currently before Waymo went deployed, now everybody can get a Waymo, right? And they just open up in LA also. So I think they tested 20 million miles, driverless miles, and I think right now it's doing pretty good. So, but I think no one, it's still setting the standard. No one really knows how many miles do you need to validate to say that it's safe enough.
Yeah, so I think if I was gonna boil down the statements into a question, it might be, how do you define, how do you define what is good enough to go into the wild, to go live?
Yeah.
Depending upon how much safety is necessary for that context.
Yeah, I mean, there's always the human comparison, right? Like, you're building a support request bot. If humans get this wrong 20% of the time and the bot's better, pretty good bot. And that's the rationale Tesla used when there was that big crash, a few years ago down in Phoenix. They're like, well, it's like 300 times more miles than the average human driver before a fatal accident, or whatever the number was. And when I read that, I was like, okay, yeah, I trust these guys. And that doesn't apply to every space or domain, though.
Actually, it depends on the use case for sure. Like in case of specific linear use case, we have the customer support tickets. So what we do is that once we train the data, first we compare with the previous tickets. So we have a baseline, thinking about it. So once it passes the baseline, customers manually try to ask the questions, random questions. Sometimes they ask who is the president of United States of America, even the customer support channel. Then they try to ask so we have one layer called the safety layer. It just takes that whether the question which I have the knowledge, but whether I should answer that knowledge question or not. So it depends on what is the customer domain is there. And some customers keep asking. They have used we give the free credits. They keep us 500, 1000, and they're still not satisfied. They say, when it is going to break? And they have said, it's not going to break. Now deploy to the production. Then it's they roll out to 1% of the people, then see the data, then 2%, then 5%, then 10%, and eventually 100%. And one day that once issues come, they just break it down. Then again, it start from the process. So it's again depends more on the use cases. where there is a fault tolerance of, I say that error, or basically say the error tolerance, like to what extent I can give. You can, for example, in case of Waymo, the error tolerance is literally like high. If the car makes the mistake, it would take the life of the human. In case of some other cases, maybe like some wrong answer, something which you can just say that, okay, it's wrong, I will just move on.
I would say probably is all the use case and sort of human consensus matters here. Just because if you said to me, the Waymo is twice as safe as a human driver, people probably wouldn't accept that level, right? With the number of crashes that were happening at that point. So there is definitely a sociological component in that decision-making process. And certainly, I think laws are gonna get behind any rapidly changing technology.
I think the expectation is super high, like when a human can make the mistake, you just say, okay, 1 or 2 errors are okay, but when it comes to machine, you have like 0. Even not even the 1, 0, like if you just one make mistake, it's like it's not working. Human is like, okay, it's fine, you will learn from next time.
Okay, one last question, I believe.
I think we've covered a broad range of topics, and I feel like predominantly they were covering, okay, what's the impact of AI on tech or on businesses? I'm wondering, I would love to hear your thoughts. What's the impact of AI on humans? Because I think we all can agree that, you know, models are as good as the data they're trained on, and someone has to classify the data. If I open Instagram and see a post, someone has to confirm whether this post is appropriate or not, and whether the model done it right or wrong. And ultimately, it falls into humans. And I feel like the trend I'm seeing is that businesses are getting more hungry for the data. Therefore, for people who have to do the classifications, and seeing the secondary effect is that like it can fall into mental health of people who have to review the data, for instance, who have to do the classifications. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts of like, what's the green path, or what are the secondary effects, or like things we have to watch out for as we're going through this process?
I can give you answer, just one perspective. I don't know, maybe you might not like it. Actually, to avoid humans having to deal with a lot of this information, that's where we kind of count on AI and count on automation systems. This doesn't have to just be AI, but you know, even before AI, like people were, or at least companies were already building trust and safety mechanisms where today, you know, a lot of the content gets reviewed by such processes or AI agents, or, you know, something that's automating that before it reaches the human. And the benefit of that is then we're sort of limiting the exposure of a human being to have to review this content. So by having this type of automation in place, that can really help. So again, that's just, you know, it's one perspective of it.
I'm actually interested, I don't know if you were asking this question, but in terms of the impact on humanity, not of, you know, feeding the AI algorithm, but of the AI algorithm being used, right? I think right now that, so my sort of cynical name for generative AI is derivative AI. And if in my ideal world, whatever fraction of an answer came from a human, so this answer came from 20 humans, each of those humans should get a fraction of the money that built that answer, right? Whether it happens to be text or image or whatever, right? Right now, it just seems like there's a lot of theft that's happening. And you could argue that just like Uber was in a way actually a legal startup and not a tech startup, that the AI companies are sort of capital intensive legal startups. They're just getting ahead of the problem. And they're training a lot. So I know that could be considered a controversial viewpoint. But I do see a negative societal impact that needs to get fixed somehow. I don't know if anybody wants to say anything like that.
I think I'm just gonna, I mean, we kind of do the same thing with Realty, and we definitely get mortgage processors and underwriters, and they're saying, look, we went through and we sent you over a conditional approval that had something that your platform missed. But I'm just giving an example, use case, you're essentially saying, should that person that found that get something once we train him, we made it better? Is that essentially what you're saying? Trying to clarify.
Well, so if the person that found it was on your payroll, then
They're not,
they're not, okay, so
they're a user.
so a
Not only are we
user,
not paying them, they're paying us.
they're paying you. Well, it depends on what the legal agreement is. In this case, there's a lack of legal agreement in a lot of this training data,
Yeah.
right?
I think practically, that would be pretty difficult to implement.
I agree.
We have all created, if you've tweeted or posted anywhere, content that an AI may or may not use for a given answer. And it would also, I mean, technically, it would be too expensive to even implement attribution. So that's my little, well, actually nerd hat. Oh, you couldn't build it. But I kind of agree with you that there's a trend toward the bigger players trying to get ahead on regulation and legal, so that they can do whatever they want and no one else can come along and compete with them. Wouldn't be the first industry where that happens.
I mean, we've thought about going through and also incentivizing, the same thing, it's like, the more of these we find out, the more these problems. I would actually pay somebody to know that. So I think it just comes down to what you want to do as a business. For us, we want the best model, and sometimes you get that by people proactively telling you what's wrong with it. And we want more data in, and I think, imagine for our business, we have to get W-2s and train on pay stubs and tax returns and insurance and appraisals, so there's a lot of data we have. Imagine, I mean, we've actually talked about it, Intuit has all the data on you about tax returns, in many cases your credit. They don't have your house and the layout and photos of it. We do. It's very dangerous data, but I think that at the end of the day, it's hard for us to get that data, it's something we have to pay to get it. And to train the models, we have to train the models, and the more data we get, the better it is. So we have to incentivize.
I think this fine boundary between human and AI generated content is just reducing a lot, and over a period of time, step by step, it's hard to say that whether it was an AI generated content or human generated content. In fact, what is happening is that AI small workers, they are generating the content which are getting used to train another model. So over a period of time, those bigger models become another worker model that are generating another content. So it's like there'll be one day nobody can tell that it was basically AI or a human. So at that time, attribution part may be like just only thing, maybe like save us or like can help us distinguish this from this kind of the good policies that the government bring up. But I don't think that like going it 2 to 4 years down the line is easy to differentiate human versus AI content.
Not to mention, like a 6-year-old is a large language model that's learning from all the things that it reads and hears, and as the proportion of content they consume is AI generated, like at that point an LLM teaches people to talk, which is thought that just occurred to me.
Yeah, I just picked a fun example that sometimes my wife copies my signature. Like, she have never used it, but it's difficult to like who signed it in the paper. And then we realize that AI will be someday will be able to do it in a more in a different way. Like who wrote this email? Is it me or like I don't know.
Eventually, we'll have our AIs talk to each other and never have to think.
There is a famous like memes also like there's like this Alexa and Google Home talking to each other.
Yeah, I've read some of these, sci-fi stories of two LLMs falling in love and like this, you have all kinds of interesting things. But to answer the core question, I think it's very much a chicken and egg situation at this point. Where, on the one hand, one can argue and say, okay, well, all of this information is already on the net. So if a human, me, is accessing this information that's already on the net for free, shouldn't then also an AI or LLM agent be able to do basically the same thing? Like, why should there or should there be like a separate set of rules for the human versus an LLM and so on. So like I'm saying, like, it's a chicken and egg situation. There's a lot of debate that can happen because you can argue in favor of both sides pretty much. And, you know, I don't know, we could be here all night on that, you know, having that discussion. But to the point of what you were making, I really actually agree with this. Already there's so much content generated. Even before the advent of AI, and, you know, there was a lot of surfacing of misinformation and things like that. At that point itself, we were already starting to question how much of what's available online we can actually trust. So that question is not new. So even now, if you are asking AI for information and you are relying on it to an extent, it's the same question, like how much of what the AI is telling you can you trust? I think everybody has their own, you know, comfort level with this. For me personally, I feel that I use LLMs a lot too, and ask a lot of questions and try to learn more information for just, you know, day-to-day things, very similar to you. The way I make that decision is if it's a very low risk type of thing, like, you know, what to cook or what's for dinner, or how do I don't know, fix something in my garden or fix something in my home, things like that. If it's a low risk decision, I would kind of trust it. I might not feel the need to verify it if it kind of makes sense. If it's some like high risk type of decision, I don't know, related to like finances or something that's going to impact me in a big way, whatever it's saying could be a good starting point, but I would definitely do my due diligence and verify it. Now, what does that say about my level of trust for AI? I don't know. I can definitely say something about my personality. I'm probably not a very trusting person when it comes to serious decisions. I need to verify things for myself. But if it's something that's more low risk, more casual, then that's, you know, it's fine with me. Even if I were wrong or if I made the wrong choice, the impact is not that great. So I think it says more about me as a person versus, you know, I don't know, trusting an entity or person.
I think actually, it does have to do with the trust of an entity or person, at least as a societal sort of trend. There may be a new type of media literacy. You're talking about it as almost like media literacy, right? How do you trust something? So I think humans are pretty flexible and adaptable, and so hopefully they can adapt to this as well.